Welcome into the Horse Racing Show, episode number 32. I'm Kenny Rice. Glad that you're watching or listening to us on YouTube, on iTunes, or on Google Play, or on the Ville 93.9 in Louisville, Kentucky. What a show we have today. Hall of Fame jockey Gary Stevens will join us in just a few moments. He'll talk about this 3-year-old picture. If you watch the Travers, it was a great performance by Code of Honor to win that race. So Gary will talk about that. And of course, with Gary, we can talk about all kinds of things. And then maybe the most innovative person in horse racing. He is certainly one of them. Martin Panza, who is the Senior Vice President of Racing Operations for the New York Racing Association. And the name Martin Panza, probably in the industry, everybody knows. You might be familiar with him if you enjoy wagering occasionally, because he is the creator of the first guaranteed payout. The first guaranteed. He came up with the $1 million guaranteed pick six at Hollywood Park in 1998. Which now just seems like a natural thing. You hear guaranteed pools and all that, but it was Martin Panza that came up with the idea. We'll talk to him about many topics, including where have all the horses gone? You know, there was a recent race at Saratoga. There were only 3 horses in it. Chad Brown had all 3. Of course, Chad Brown finished 1, 2, 3, but you never thought that you'd see that at Saratoga. And it's not just there, but you look all over the place. Santa Anita, among their many problems, had trouble getting, 5 and 6 horse fields. And it's that way at almost every meet out there. You go to Churchill Downs after the Kentucky Derby, a couple of weeks later, and you see small fields. And one of the reasons the horses aren't out there like they used to be, it's simple attrition. I know very little about math, but our researcher, Mr. Thomas Kenny, is a whiz at math. Therefore, he got the assignment of finding out what's happened to the United States foal crop in recent years, Thomas.
Yeah, courtesy of the Jockey Club, they've always kept really good records about this sort of thing. Since in the year 1990, the foal crop of the United States, and that's not including Canada, it's just the United States, was about 40,000 foals. Mm-hmm. And all the way through until about 2009, that number kind of hovered in the 35 to 30,000 range. And then starting in 2010, it dipped below 30,000. And then this year, 2019, we've dipped below 20,000.
I mean, I can't even do math very well, but I know that's less than 50% of what it used to be. Therefore, there aren't as many horses running, because just because there's 20,000 foals born, it's just like high school basketball players. How many are really going to go on and play college? Not every horse out there is going to become a racehorse, even though they were bred for that. And so what you have then is, it's just a depleted pool. I mean, the shallow end is getting more towards the shallow end, so you have fewer horses out there. The dilemma for racetracks, and we've seen that, and I'm not saying this is the only reason. I think it's something to consider, though, for horses when we see, tragically, some horses that have injuries, if not catastrophic, they're injured and they have to move to the sideline a while, especially the older horses. I think sometimes there's kind of a pressure there to try to get them back to the track to try to fill up some of these cards. Now, that's just my take on it. I can't say that I've done great research into it, but you know what I'm talking about. If you follow horse racing, pay attention to some of these horses that have had breakdowns and kind of look at their age. Not that it can't happen to younger horses, but a lot of these horses, I think, were pushed to stay in training just to try to help fill out cards, because it's opened up out there. There's some pretty good races. When you're getting 5% of the purse for finishing 5th, even, it's a pretty decent purse. You're going to try to run a horse, aren't you? I mean, probably.
And purses are higher than they've ever been.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Fewer horses, higher purses.
More races?
Scott Hall on lead guitar. Ben Chafin's on bass, of course, with us again this week. Yeah, I mean, more races. I mean, I don't know the solution on that. Looks like in a perfect world, and there is no such thing, but in a perfect world, and don't we all want world peace? I watched Miss Congeniality the other day. It was on cable, and I'm sitting around, and that's so hilarious. I mean, I thought that was just, I liked it when everybody answered world peace.
Yeah, that's right.
I think Sandra Bullock's line in that was harsher penalties for parole violators.
Yeah, that was it.
And everybody just kind of was stunned, they look at, and then she said, and world peace. And they all erupted one more time. So in the world peace hoped for of the horse racing world, I don't know if you could have fewer races, because that means fewer betting opportunities. But would you bet more if you had fuller fields to bet on instead of 4 or 5 horse fields? Now, is it more interesting? You got 7, 8, 9 horses in a field consistently over, say, 6 races in a day, maybe 7 as opposed to 8 and 9. Maybe just take 1 or 2 races off. I don't know. That's interesting. If you have a thought on that, by the way, you can email us. You can send us a tweet at Horse Racing, at the Horse Racing Show, or you can follow us on Facebook at the Horse Racing Show. It's pretty simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, what would you do? I mean, what's your opinion on this, Thomas?
Well, I mean, the trend recently with a lot of 3-year-old horses has been to just, if they find success, even if it's not in, like, say, a Triple Crown race, but say they win the Pegasus, or they win the Haskell or the Travers, they retire to stud.
Yeah.
So you're losing a lot of your star power that you get throughout the year, and then people can't come back and say, say they follow, say someone just likes Saratoga races, right?
Right.
They live in the area, they follow Saratoga, and say you've got, a really talented 3-year-old who trains on site at Saratoga and, runs in their meets. Well, there's really not the recurring names anymore because all those horses are retiring to stud.
That's true. You don't have. I'm trying to think of who's going to still be around next year. Just looking ahead, maybe Country House comes back. I think people will still remember him, of course, from that Derby. But you look at this crop of 3-year-olds. I don't know who'll still stay around. I have a feeling, like you say, if whoever has the most success will probably be going to stud. There might be some that are also runs that you want to put them in next year to try to help their breeding stock as a 4-year-old. But that's the one thing. You lose the star power. Very few older horses. For example, Mackenzie, you may remember Mackenzie ran last year as a 3-year-old, is one of the horses, maybe the best older horse right now, certainly on dirt. But then you try to think of who else. There's some horses that, again, if you follow horse racing, you know what I'm talking about. This is the preaching to the converted thing here. But you'll know about Midnight Bijou or Bricks and Mortar or World Approval. You'll know about these horses. But if you don't, you pretty much are limited to what you see during the Triple Crown.
Yep.
Or what you see this year with the 3-year-old C. I don't know. Scott, what do you think? Do you follow it? You follow horse racing enough, but do you get excited about some of these older horse races?
I mean, I do. I think back to, the days where I really got into it was, Silver Charm Cigar, those guys.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know what the solution is. I know the math doesn't add up, though. If there's more races and less horses, it's, there's something going on. I don't know the answer.
I don't need, what if we did know it, they wouldn't pay us any extra money, so we're not telling them.
That's very true.
hey, if you're listening out there, NTRA and Breeders' Cup will sell you the advice.
That's right.
Well, for a price, we'll tell you all about it.
Maybe we do have a solution.
Yeah, hold on. I think we're onto something. We certainly have a great show today. Gary Stevens, Martin Panza will join us later. Up next, the Hall of Fame jockey. On all these 3-year-olds, who's the best out there right now? Because after Code of Honor, I don't think you can say definitively that Maximum Security is the best for sure right now. Stay with us. The Horse Racing Show continues. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show, episode number 32. Thank you again for liking and subscribing to us on YouTube, listening on your iPad to iTunes, or listening in Google Play. Glad to have this man back. He's a great friend of mine. He's one of the greatest jockeys of all time, the Hall of Famer, and also an analyst for Fox Sports. You probably saw him on the Travers over the weekend. He is Gary Stevens. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Kenny. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it was great to see you, by the way, on the Fox broadcast. You know, I miss working with you, but it was it was a great job as always, and a big day as always, Travers Day.
Yeah, it was a huge day. Sixth grade ones, and just an epic day. Beautiful weather, great crowd, and great racing.
And we have an impressive winner in Code of Honor, a horse that Shug McGahee, the trainer, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about him, was pointed towards this race. And with that impressive showing, I guess this kind of makes it really interesting the rest of the way out on the 3-year-old scene.
Yeah, and in my view, and I know some people will disagree, they've still got maximum security up at the top. But I think with that performance over the weekend and the field that he beat and the way with authority he did it in and the style that he did it in my books, at least, he moves to the leaderboard right now on top. And he was so impressive. And Shug, leading up to the race, he had that quiet confidence. You could kind of read between the lines. Shug not a braggart at all, just good old boy. And when we interviewed him midweek, he talked about his workout leading up to it and kind of had that smirk on his face. And I commented afterwards, I said, that's about as much bragging and confidence as you're going to get out of Shug McGahee. But I said that little smirk said a lot right there. And man, did it ever with the way he showed up. And great ride by Johnny Velasquez. He always shows up on the big days. He's had a great year, and he stuck with this. Colt believed in him, and him being a late foal and everything. He's just now coming into his own. And Shug talking about the possibility of running him back in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. He's given himself a couple of options to get himself up to the Breeders' Cup if that's the route that he chooses.
And you hope one day, in some fashion, maybe it'll take all the way to the Breeders' Cup, that Maximum Security meets up with Code of Honor and the rest of the really good, well, whatever is left of the really good 3-year-olds this year.
Yeah, and I guess a few of the horses, Maximum Security being one, pointing for the Pennsylvania Derby. It's a big race now on the calendar for the 3-year-olds. Might see a game winner show up there. He obviously was pointed for the Travers and got the virus and wasn't able to run. But I'd imagine Bob Baffert looking at that pretty hard as well.
Baffert just shows up and gets a piece of it, though, doesn't he? Mucho Gusto coming in third.
Yeah, he ran a great race. Talamo gave him a great ride. You know, he said publicly he's not his best 3-year-old, but he's a good one, and he shows up and he runs hard every time.
We talked to Brad Cox last week, who had Owendale, of course, but leading up to the Travers, and he likened this. He thought it was probably the best 3-year-old field since the Kentucky Derby, Gary, that gathered over the weekend at Saratoga for the Travers.
Yeah, I think so. With Tacitus being in there, and now Tacitus against Code of Honor. He's beaten him both times they faced each other, and Bill Mott, he's talking about the Jockey Club Gold Cup as well as his next target. So that will be them facing older horses for the first time. But I think we've got a great crop of 3-year-olds this year. They've mixed it up, matched it up, and traded punches. And I'm looking forward to, seeing all of those horses matching up against Maximum Security once again.
Well, we talked about, you mentioned Johnny Velasquez coming to the occasion in a big race. So, too, one Gary Stevens in big races. He was always there, Derbies and Preakness, Belmont, Breeders' Cup, whatever the case. You are always in those big races. What's it like with you when you have a 3-year-old that's pretty good and you're testing him against older horses? Is there a little more excitement about that? Let's see if this is the real deal for you, for the trainer, everybody involved when that happens.
I always had a pretty good idea if they could match up with older horses, because I was usually riding a good older horse and knew what it was going to take to be able to compete with the older horses. So I kind of had a good guideline to go by, and we weren't wrong too often stepping up, whether they were ready for it or not. And most of the guys that I was riding for, they knew when they could match up. Bob Baffert, he already knows which ones are going to be able to run with the older horses, because most of them have been working with some older horses throughout this whole springtime and summer, because he didn't have other 3-year-olds that could match up to his top horses. So you see that a lot with Chad Brown as well, working, Colts against fillies and fillies against the Colts and older horses. So you've got a pretty good radar on what picture of what they can be able to compete, what level.
Talking with the Hall of Fame jockey Gary Stevens, analyst for the Fox Network now. Had the pleasure of working with him for many years at NBC, and we've known each other. I don't even know. We were kids, Gary, when we met.
Yeah, we were. It's got to be over 30-some years.
Yeah, we were little bitty kids, by the way. We want to clear that up. We were really young.
I went back and watched, some races over the weekend. I had to talk about the 1995 Travers on Thunder Gulch, and went back and watched that race. They had the full telecast on, and I was looking. I said, "Man, I was a baby." And and in the 2001 Travers on Thunder Gulch's son, Point Given, winning the Travers, and it was amazing to watch those races. I had almost identical trips on both of them. Thunder Gulch, he got left at the start. He kind of the assistant starter forgot to turn him loose, and he reared at the start, and I had this look of panic on my face, and he got right back in the race, laying fourth, circled the field, and came home strong to win it. And then the exact same thing with Point Given in 2001. He got cantankerous in the starting gate, got himself left a little bit, and then I got the exact same trip that I got on his daddy 6 years earlier. So it was a lot of fun going back and watching those races.
I love to watch the old race. I like to watch the old sports stuff. I'll watch if this have clips of an old ball game or something. I enjoy that. And the same with the races, and the same with the Travers. I mean, there's just something about that race, isn't there? If you can't win one of the Triple Crowns along the way, and before you've done them both, you won Triple Crown races and that. But there's something about that Midsummer Derby to me that's always exciting.
Well, it's a decision maker a lot of time for the 3-year-old championship. If it's close, who's going to win the championship. And that year with Point Given in 2001, we get beat as a favorite in the Kentucky Derby, come back, win the Preakness, the Belmont, the Haskell. But winning the Midsummer Derby, the Travers, that was kind of our Triple Crown, winning the Preakness, the Belmont, and then the Travers. I felt like he really showed his stuff, and he went on to be champion and horse of the year.
And the atmosphere at Saratoga, for people that haven't been there, it's kind of hard to explain. It's the racing, but you got the picnic crowd, and they're hanging out at the trees, and people have seen it. Maybe they watched the Fox telecast with you over the weekend. There's an atmosphere like it that I'm not sure any other track has that kind of atmosphere. At least I've never felt that, and I'm not even comparing like who has the best track. It's just that atmosphere at Saratoga is like none other in horse racing.
Well, Kenny, I'll say one thing. Working 5 days a week up here all summer long. The crowds on a Wednesday are set for our normal Fox shows right down at the 8th pole, right down amongst the crowd and the real people, the real gamblers, and then they got their beer kegs out there and just having a good old time. But the fans walking through the grandstand, through the backyard, and through the grandstands. Everybody in New York, they're great fans here at Saratoga, unlike anywhere else I've ever been. It's like going back in the 60s when the crowds were huge. Yeah. And everybody's got an opinion. They like their horses. They know their horses, and they like to bet on them. And it's just, to me, the best racing fans in the world show up here at Saratoga Racecourse.
I agree. And like you say, they come in, they got the little kids. Well, your lovely daughter, Maddie's up there. She's actually been a horse racing reporter. I've seen her work. She's very good.
Yeah, and she got to take her first trip through the Hall of Fame yesterday and wanted to see Daddy's plaque up there. I was inducted in 1997, so she wasn't even thought back then. And we got to go through and see all the horses that are now in the Hall of Fame that I rode. And there's one wall that Serena's song, and then there was one other horse in between, but then there was Silver Charm and Silver Bullet Day, right? Their plaques right next to each other. So I had 3 of them within 4 plaques that were up there, which was pretty cool. We got some good pictures and really enjoyed ourselves.
That's some incredible memories that you've given us all. And I'm sure some fans, when you're walking around at Saratoga, still come up, because that's another thing about the New York fans or the people that drive over from Boston or wherever in that area to come over and watch races at Saratoga. They know the history of you and all the jockeys that have done well or trainers that have done well. It's fascinating to me how they know it. Just like going to a Dodgers game and somebody still wants to talk about Sandy Koufax. They know what's going on.
Yeah, every day that walk from the production trailer down to the set, I get stopped. It must be 50 times coming to and from. People wanting to talk about horses from this year, that year, who is the best, and people waiting off the set for when the show is over with, wanting pictures and some autographs and stuff. And it hasn't been work. It's been an experience of a lifetime. I've got to enjoy this summer up here, working 5 days a week, or getting to experience it 5 days a week, and just hanging out with people and making friends. It's been great.
Do they give you advice like they did when you rode? That is another thing about them. They'll tell you how you should have ridden that race.
Oh yeah, well, most of it. We've got one lady, huge fan, that she shows up once a week, and she thinks she's the set producer up there. She says you need some more lighting up here. You ought to really go with blue shirts more often because of your eyes. So I'm not getting advice about riding races. I'm getting advice how to dress and how to light the stage up there. So it's a good time.
Well, they always offer advice. The things they've said, the things I've heard, like at Belmont Day or a big race up there, the thing I've heard, I go, wow, I'm glad that I don't have any family members close by hearing this.
Well,
and I'm not costing them money, They're not betting on me. So.
On Travers Day this year, everybody asks, who do you like? Who do you like? You tell them who you like. It's a code of honor, and they tell you how he cannot win, and how Tacitus or Owendale or whoever, everybody had their opinion. So a lot of fun.
I'm always reminded when everybody asks who wins, my next to your great performance in Seabiscuit, which really is a great performance, by the way, friendship aside.
Thank you.
I love Let It Ride. I love that where he goes around and says, who do you like? And he marks off the one horse that nobody liked is the one he bet on and won.
Yeah.
That's
about how it goes. That's about how it goes, too.
How's that? Yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, I was just going to say I put in a pick 5 ticket here a couple of weeks ago that Jonathan Kitchen had given me, a great handicapper, by the way, on our show, and passes out his tickets. And I've been losing all summer, so I started betting his tickets and I started winning. But in my NYRA accounts, I think I had $86 left in there, and the ticket he had given me was $88, so I'm $1 short. So I took a horse out of the last race, a horse that Rajiv Mirage was on, and I knew it could be a mistake, but my ticket wound up costing me $76, and so I had $14 left over or whatever, and I'm live to the smallest ticket's going to pay $1,200, and Mirage was in the hunt coming into the stretch, and I'm like, oh no. Yeah. And anyway, I wound up hitting for $2,500 thanks to Jonathan Kitchen, but that was sort of my let it ride that day.
It's good to have those, isn't it? The thing is, if you just have one every now and then, it keeps you going.
Oh, absolutely. And I sit up there and I'm betting dollars here, dollar tries and different things just to have a little action and have some fun, have a laugh with it, not trying to get rich or break myself either. And that's a beautiful thing about horse racing. The one thing, I'm not going to critique the show because I'm not going to critique the show. And, you and Lafitte are great friends. And I liked what I really liked the best outside of you and Lafitte was when they introduced the jockeys and they come through the smoke machine. Yeah.
I like that.
We had some issues with the comms the other day, and it got lagging just a tad. But no, I think it's awesome. To showcase these guys are the best in the game, and it's never been done before. We did it for the Alabama a couple of weeks ago, and did it again for the Travers, and got a great response back from it.
I think it highlights it. Like you say, you got an individual there. You get to focus on the jockey, got to see him up close, and recognize the athletes that they are. And I don't have to tell you all the injuries and things, and still one of the great sports stories of 2013 Breeders' Cup. Boy, I hope I got that year right, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, thank goodness, because I was there. And I think when you won the Breeders' Cup, after your comeback, after you left NBC and started racing again, I thought that was still one of the best sports stories, not just racing stories, that comeback.
Well, Kenny, it was a big hill to climb, and I know a lot of people thought I was crazy, and I'm wondering what I was doing. I wouldn't have done it unless I thought that I could compete at the highest level again. And fortunately, I had a lot of support when I did come back and was able to win, on that year in 2013. a couple of very, very good horses, Beholder in the Distaff, and then Mucho Macho Man in the Classic. And that was the one trophy that was missing off my mantle. It was on my bucket list, and when I had retired in 2005, I just accepted that wasn't meant to be, and then to be able to come back and win the Classic, that was the one that was missing that I got, and I felt pretty fulfilled with that.
Okay, you don't sit there every now and then and say, I could ride one more race. I'm pretty sure.
Not anymore. No, not anymore. It's done. When I had the neck injury and everything, and doctor tells me that if I have another fall, that I'm going to be riding in a wheelchair, if not worse, and that's pretty final. And that's like getting struck by lightning, and being able to walk again, and so I'm just blessed that I had the career I had, and now stay able to enjoy it in a different way, and get back in the announcing booth.
Well, you're doing a great job in that, and I really like the way that you've just transitioned right back to it. Saddle to microphone to saddle, doesn't matter. Gary just takes over.
Well, I've been lucky with the people I've been involved with throughout my sport, throughout my career in both the television industry and horse racing itself. I got to get
you got to get in one more movie at least. I do miss your acting.
I miss it too, Kenny.
Really?
I really do. I miss Ronnie Jenkins in Luck. I miss Luck. I was having a great time, but you know what? Everything happens for a reason. I can honestly say if they had not canceled Luck, I would still be doing that, and I wouldn't have come back to riding in 2013 and got to experience the great things I've got to experience over the past 7 or 8 years.
If people have a chance, I know it's got to be out there on Amazon or somewhere. Get this. Because I don't know if you remember me calling you. I called you after that first episode of Luck. I didn't recognize you for the first 30 seconds. I mean, I knew who you were.
Right.
But it was so good. You were so into that character, and it was really compelling to watch that. I don't know how you did that, but I guess that's why they call it acting.
Well, I was surrounded by a lot of great actors and great friends and human beings, and made a lot of great friends and memories that I'll never forget. And hopefully I'll get another opportunity at some point.
Well, Gary, I appreciate your time. I know you got all kinds of family up there and family stuff to do today, and thanks for hanging out with me for a while here.
Kenny, I always enjoy it, and look forward to our next talk.
Well, we did miss the dogs on the Skype this time, I will say that, but otherwise...
They're waiting patiently in California. Angie and Maddie are returning home today, leaving me up here in Saratoga for another week, and then I'm taking a cross-country road trip with my big brother, Scott. We haven't had a road trip since I was 17. He was 19, so this is going to be one for the ages.
I wish I had a camera on that one. I'd love to tour that with you.
We'll be taking some videos and stuff, posting this trip on Twitter so people can follow along with us.
Okay, I will definitely follow. I will follow Gary Stevens anyway, but especially on that. Gary, thanks for your time, pal. I really appreciate it.
All right, Kenny, thank you.
All right, Gary Stevens, a great jockey, the Fox analyst right now. He's one of the best in the business. Stay with us. More coming up on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for watching on YouTube, listening to us on iTunes or on Google Play, and downloaded now in 17 countries as well as around the United States. Appreciate that following. We have spoken many times on this show about one of the things, which is what we're trying to do, is bring you the guests that matter, that have input into the industry. We'll talk a little bit about the history, but also look ahead and talk about what's going on right now as far as horse racing. And one of the things we've talked about many times is for everybody that loves it and they want the horses to do well, and we all want that, sometimes horse racing needs to not just think outside the box, but create a whole new box. And one of the guys that's done that is Martin Panza, Senior Vice President of Racing Operations at the New York Racing Association. I think one of the most innovative guys in the business, and Martin is kind enough to join us now. And Martin, thanks for being on.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Well, when you were lured away from California and you were out there at Hollywood Park and Santa Anita and they bring you to New York, I mean, that was one of the things, right? This strategic leadership and your idea of big events like we just saw at the recent Travers Day and And that's kind of what horse racing needs in many ways, isn't it? Is a little bit of a, hey, why is this a big moment if you don't know the sport very well or you're a casual fan?
I think it is. When I came back to New York, obviously the New York Racing Association has a lot of resources, both from a purse standpoint and then from their racetracks, being Saratoga and Belmont especially. And we've tried to develop the big days. We think that, it's very difficult anymore to fix a Wednesday or a Thursday. But we tried to say, look, we have limited marketing dollars, and let's try to create a big day in New York at least once every month, April through, say, December 1st, where we can get, maybe casual fans or new fans to say, you know what, this looks interesting. Let's go out to the track. And we hope that if they have a good time at that event, that maybe they say, hey, this was pretty fun coming to the racetrack. Let's come out and do this again. So we think it's the way to move forward. And so far in New York, it's been very positive for us.
And as you say, it creates that with any sport. If you were out there going to a Dodgers game, or now in this case, going to a Yankees or Mets game, you like that when a big team comes in, right? That's when they sell it out. They don't sell it out for the team in last place. They sell it out for the rivalry or a big division game.
No, exactly. It's the same premise. We try to, give people a reason to come out. Hey, this horse is coming in from Japan, or Aidan O'Brien is sending horses in from Ireland, or hey, we've got the big California horse coming in, and there's 5 or 6 stakes races this weekend, and it's an event that you don't want to miss. And unfortunately, right now in racing, it's that's what it's going to take to get people to come out to the track. And like I said, we think it's the right way to move, and I think most of the country and even Canada has sort of moved that way.
And for you were one of the first to get in. I remember, like in California, the idea about the international fields. I mean, it's not new, but you really seem to embrace it more. Like you say, reaching out to like a great trainer like Aidan O'Brien, or a horse that's doing well from the Far East, and seeing that, again, that creates interest. Like we're seeing on the Kentucky Derby Trail now, where they're bringing in a horse qualifies automatically from Japan if they want to.
Right. I mean, racing is becoming very much international. The United States, because we have dirt racing, we've probably been a little bit slow adapting to that. But certainly as turf racing becomes more prominent in the States, you want to bring horses in from around the world. It makes it more interesting. And we get a chance to see how our horses stack up to foreign competition and vice versa. So I think it's the right thing to do. And it makes you, in the morning, you go to the track and you say, God, I can't wait to see this race today and see if we can beat the Japanese horse or the Aidan O'Brien horse. So I think it's the right way to go.
Talking with Martin Panza, Senior Vice President, Racing Operations, New York Racing Association. In the past, the creator of, among other things, the American Oaks, a great turf race for the 3-year-old fillies that, you kind of just know it now. But when you started like the American Oaks, I guess the people thought, really, you think this is going to work?
Right. Well, we were sitting at a Hollywood Park, and we were trying to find some race that would sort of give us a big event that nobody else was doing. And we looked around the country and frankly around the world, and we realized that sort of July weekend, we could create a race that would basically fit in the schedule and get big fields and be interesting. And it actually worked. And I ended up sort of bringing that same idea back to New York with me with their new Turf Triple Crown series.
Yeah, which is off to a good start.
Yeah, we're happy so far. It's the first year that we're doing it, and it's certainly a long-term project, but there was a need for it in American racing. And now if you look at a pattern of races for 3-year-olds on the turf in America, we've now got these longer races set up. And if we can get some mile races set up, Arlington Park was willing to make the Secretariat a mile. Now we create 2 divisions for turf horses in the 3-year-old category. And that's important that you have these patterns set up that allow trainers to develop horses and become our future stars, Breeders' Cup Day, or at people's big events down the road when they turn 4.
Martin, and obviously you're in, one of the key roles in a leadership position there with NYRA, and obviously influencing the whole industry. I don't want to be critical of the industry because, it's been good to me. It was my entree to network TV was through horse racing. But, sometimes we have talked on this show about a bit of a reluctance. I think that would be a fair word to say about trying something new. Even with the success you've had with new things, do you still find at times that there's a little bit of, again, reluctance to say, well, we've never done this in the past and we're still having horse racing, so why do we need something new?
I think so at times, but we're sort of in a new world these days with everything that went on at Santa Anita this winter. And I think people are more willing to try new things. And when you look at the game, really east of the Mississippi, there's probably never been a better time to be in it. I mean, purses at Oaklawn are going to be at all-time record highs. Purses in Kentucky are going to be at all-time record highs. Arlington Park just got announced that they have a casino coming. Monmouth Park just got a $10 million purse subsidy. Colonial Downs just reopened and are giving away $500,000 a day. You've got the NYRA tracks where our purses have never been better. So really, if you look at it, with purses, they've never been better on the East Coast and the Midwest. And then you throw in the tax advantages that people get. And, a lot of people, you can play this game 60 cents on the dollar. It's a time when I think at some point here we're going to start to see some growth because things really have never been better.
And you got like you say, it's kind of in some ways a paradox because you've got, like you say, you've got more money now, and, with the race that's going to be in Saudi next year, all the big super days of racing that continue to seem to grow. But yet, like recently at Saratoga, you got a 3-horse race. I think it was a Chad Brown trifecta. And not just there, but in other major tracks, you're seeing smaller fields. Of course, there's less horses. I mean, the foal crop's half the size that it was 30 years ago. Is there any concern with that or any way to get more people to have more horses out there?
There is. So the foal crop has obviously gone, from say 45,000 down to around 20. And we probably have a little too much racing in the States, but it's a fine line because we also we're a job creator, and you have to choose that line of creating jobs for people and allowing horsemen to run and allowing them to keep those grooms and exercise riders in their barns and keeping those guys in business so that the business can keep going. At the same time, we've got some super trainers that have most of the horses in their barns, and between the foal crop and maybe some of the super trainers, we do run some small fields at times. However, if you go back, and I like to collect old programs, if you go back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there were times when they were running 3, 4, 5 horse fields back then too. So I think that's probably for certain categories, it's going to happen. It's something we don't want to see happen, but there's probably a little bit too much racing still in the States.
Is a solution I don't know, would you reduce the card each day and hope to have bigger fields? I mean, is that even a thing to think about? That'd be like 1 or 2 less races to bet each day, but you'd have more competitive fields maybe. I'm sure it'd be a thrill for whoever's the racing secretary to try to figure that out.
It could be a reduction in number of races run per day. If you look at a lot of the European tracks, they'll run 6 or 7 races a day and that's it. So it's certainly something to look at. But our model is a little different than the rest of the world. The racetracks in the United States make their money off of handle, where the rest of the world, they tend to make their money off of hospitality and attendance. Mm-hmm. So for us, we always want to generate as much handle as possible. And usually you do that through more racing. That said, there are times when we've cut back the number of races on a card and actually handled more money. So at this upcoming Belmont meet, because of the hockey arena being built at Belmont Park, we are going to run 8 races on weekdays. And so that'll be an interesting experiment just to see, hey, we're running less races on weekdays. What does that do to our handle?
And the greatest thing that'll happen there, one of the greatest things that'll happen, the Islanders make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and you have the Belmont in the afternoon, the Stanley Cup Championship that night.
I don't know where we'll park everybody, but yeah, that would be a pretty interesting event, especially for NBC, I assume. Yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to getting the Islanders on the property and getting, Belmont rebuilt, not only with a new arena, but also a new Belmont Park for our fans. It's been, I think that track was built in 1958 or remodeled in 58. And so it's been a while since there's been an upgrade. So we're looking forward to the next few years to make some changes there.
Martin Panza, not only the Senior VP of Racing Operations at New York Racing Association, been on the Graded Stakes Committee, the Breeders' Cup Selection Committee. As we said earlier, quite an innovator. And you touched on the problems that they had at Santa Anita. That's been well documented. We know about that. And the Breeders' Cup is going to still stay at Santa Anita. They decided that with unanimous vote. A situation that I thought was good to not give up on one of the marquee tracks is kind of a vote of confidence, in my opinion, Marty.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was very important that the Breeders' Cup stayed at Santa Anita. Listen, it's a gorgeous facility. It's been there for many years. I mean, it's the great race place. I think they went through a difficult winter. I think, they had 16 inches of rain and they ran 19 additional races. They just, the track man who'd been there for many years had left. A lot of things just aligned. And when you get into situations like that, you want to slow it down as quickly as possible and react as quickly as possible. And if anything, if you look at the bright side of what's coming out of this, I think, most of the major tracks, we're all working together now. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot more safety rules that are being put in place. And I think it's a great thing that Breeders' Cup supported Santa Anita because we need California horse racing as a country, and we need Santa Anita and Del Mar to thrive. And it's important that, we do whatever we can on the East Coast to support the West Coast and vice versa. We all need each other in this industry. And so I applaud what the Breeders' Cup board did because it was, probably a difficult decision for them, but I think it was the right one.
Do you ever fly over like I do when you're coming into LAX and look down at what used to be Hollywood Park and get a little sentimental? I do. That was the first track I went to in California was Hollywood Park years ago.
Yeah, I worked there for 23 years,
Yeah.
and I actually went over there about 6 months ago. It's not the easiest thing to see. If you think about it, I think in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, Hollywood Park led the country for like 20-something years in a row in handle, attendance, and purses. And to think that it's gone, it's just a sad situation. But it got to a point where, the land was so valuable and we just weren't generating enough, positive revenue that, unfortunately it's gone. And that's why it's important for us to really, support places like Santa Anita because we need those places to stay as racetracks.
I had my picture taken in front of the Cary Grant Pavilion when I was at Hollywood Park years ago. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting place. I mean, Marge Everett built the Cary Grant Pavilion, and it was a great racetrack. I mean, it was on the west side of town in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of wealth on the coast there, and it would run in the summers and Friday nights, and Mr. Hubbard came in there and really tried to revitalize it, and Churchill Downs came in and tried to make a go of it, and we'll miss it. I mean, it was a special place, certainly.
Martin Panza is a legend among any gambler out there. Anybody I know, and that's most of them, that's ever placed a bet because you created the first guarantee, that Pick Six $1 million guarantee, I believe, around 1998.
Yeah, that was interesting. We kicked that back and forth for about a year at Hollywood Park, and Keith Champlin was with the NYRA, was working at Hollywood Park at the time as director of marketing. And I remember one Friday night we were like, you know what, we need to do this. And we went to Mr. Hubbard and we said, listen, we have this idea. Can we try it? And first time we did it, I think we guaranteed it for $1 million, and I think we handled about $3.2 million. And Hubbard was actually out of town that day. And he came back a couple days later and he's like, hey, we're going to do this again in about 2 weeks. So I think we did it like 3 times that meet. And certainly it got copied by everyone and as it ran its course. But it worked, and it was interesting. I remember the excitement that day at the racetrack was just tremendous.
I remember hearing about it, and I said, this is impossible. They're guaranteeing it. This cannot be. And, I think a lot of us that ever made a bet thought this is a great thing. This is, you reinvented the wheel when you came up with this, Martin.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And at the time it made a lot of sense. And, I'm sort of sad to see where the Pick Six has gone these days. I'm a big believer in sort of the $2 Pick Six. And NYRA was one of the last tracks to do away with it. And we're actually working to try and bring it back. We've got the jackpot pick six, but we're also working to bring back the traditional pick six as well.
I think that's important. I think that's certainly one thing. We talk about moving forward and innovation, everything. That's one thing I would still embrace 30 years later, 20 years later, is the $2 pick six.
I think a lot of people just grew up with it. And I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it started down in Caliente. It used to be the 510. And then Marge Everett brought it up to the States. And I think just, a lot of old time racing fans, they grew up with the pick six and that's what they knew. And there's a lot of players. I think it's just a different group of players from what's playing the jackpot pick sixes right now. So we are looking at ways to try and bring it back. And you got to keep doing that. You have to keep evolving with your wagers and evolving with your races if you can, because the world is changing quickly through technology and we need to change with it whenever we see an opportunity.
And with sports wagering now, some states have started it. I guess Jersey, you can go over there and make sports bets now in Jersey. I believe I am right on that. I just got back from Vegas last week, which we know you could always do that in Nevada for years. Is that going to change horse racing? Does it kind of help it? Will more people get involved in gambling and start looking at horse racing that may have only looked at football and basketball, but they go out there to make a bet on a football game and they go, hey, there's a horse race up there. I can bet on that. I mean, I just don't know what the answer would be. I'd like your insight.
Well, I think like in the case of Monmouth Park in New Jersey, it's at a bricks and mortar location. And so it's certainly brought people out to the racetrack and it's maybe brought a different clientele out to the racetrack. And then that clientele is betting the races as well. So I think it's a positive on that end. We'd love in New York to try and get it where, at least our racetracks can offer it so that we do get some bricks and mortar play back and forth. And then if it's going to go onto the internet and through mobile devices or through computers, then it's important that racing get attached to that website so that if someone wants to play, a football game or a baseball game, there's also the ability for them to play horse racing off of that website. So, it's a change and it needs to adapt to it, and we need to be part of it if we can. And I know in New York, we're working very closely to try and make sure that happens.
I remember the days when they put the padlock on the payphone before the race.
Yeah, I remember the old days. I grew up, jumping the fence and going into Santa Anita, and I remember all the rows of payphones, and they would lock them up before post time, and no cell phones back then. So different time, and technology continues to move forward and racing needs to go with it. And, I think in New York, we've done a very good job. Tony Alivato's done a great job from a TV standpoint and putting us on the TV as much as possible. And NYRA Bets, we keep trying to move that platform forward to allow people to bet, through the phone or through their computers. And you just have to keep evolving. And I think racing, Churchill Downs, Stronach Group, NYRA, Del Mar, Oakland, I think we're all sort of moving in unison to try and work together to create new platforms to make it easier for fans and to continue to try to grow our sport.
A young Martin Panza jumping the fence at Santa Anita. I imagine you thought possibly you were going to have a career in horse racing in some capacity.
I didn't really know at the time. Basically, high school, I had some friends' parents who owned horses, and truthfully, we probably snuck to the track every day. We had it worked out that if you won at lunchtime, you could bet the first, and you couldn't see the second. So if you played the double, you had to wait till after sixth period to figure out if you hit the double or not. But we had a lot of fun every weekend. Santa Anita was packed, and we were trying to figure out whose parents weren't going that weekend so we could use their box. And, it was a lot of good memories. Had a good group of friends that, we just loved going to the races every weekend and didn't really think about ever working there. And then when I got through college, I sort of said, I really like racing and it's something I want to get into. And my father had always said, look, you're going to have to work for the rest of your life, do something that you love. And I just made my way to the track.
And done it well. I mean, really, I mean that you're one of really the innovators in the sport. You talked about the sport kind of coming more together with everything that happened at Santa Anita. Do you think there's a need, or do you think it could ever happen that there would be an actual racing commissioner or some semblance of an actual board that would be over all of racing, that, New York and Kentucky and Arkansas and Florida and California and all in between could agree on that, okay, we've got a committee that will be in charge, if not an actual commissioner?
It's a difficult question, and it's something that's been kicked around, obviously, for the last 2 or 3 decades. And, it's difficult for racing because we operate in 38 different states, and they've all got, state regulators. Unfortunately, a lot of them have different rules. And then you've got racetrack companies that, some are publicly traded companies and some are privately owned. And it's difficult because we're not like an NFL or a Major League Baseball where everything is pooled together and monies go back to each team. So it's difficult to see if there could be an office that maybe, is like the NFL commissioner's office or Major League Baseball's, president. But I think there can be an office that can take care of, say, the integrity of racing, where the rules are uniform and there's somebody nationally making sure that everybody is adhering to those rules and that we're all on the same line, whether it's a medication rule or whether it's a safety rule on the racetrack. And I believe that we're working as an industry to try and come up with some sort of plan to lead us in that direction, where at least from the administration of races run, it would be under the same rules, whether it's medication or safety. And I think that's probably a good starting point. And if we can start to work together to get our stakes races better aligned so we're not running the same stakes on the same day, you can start to see where the sport can move forward. And I think, like I said earlier, with what happened at Santa Anita earlier this year, if there's a bright ray of sunshine coming out of that, this is it, that we are talking and the big tracks are working together and we are trying to move the ball forward. Earlier in the year, we announced a LASIX initiative with Churchill, Stronach, NYRA, Oaklawn, Del Mar, Tampa Bay, a few other tracks, where starting next year, 2020, we wouldn't use LASIX in 2-year-old races, and in 2021, we wouldn't use it in any of our stakes. And that was solely because of what was going on at Santa Anita and the ability for the racetracks to get on the phone and talk to each other and say, guys, we need to make some changes. We need to work together and move forward. So in a long-winded answer to your original question, I think there is room for some sort of a national sort of movement forward where there is somebody overlooking at least the administration of racing.
That was not a long-winded answer, by the way. Everything made total sense. And I don't, you know what? It's not a situation where I don't think anybody could sum it up in 10 seconds. Like you say, there's too many in play here, too many states, too many racing associations, and, a lot of powerful people. Let's face it, a lot of people that's pretty powerful that have their own opinions about things. So, no, I think that was perfect what you said. And I would make you commissioner if it was up to me. And I don't know you that well. You've always been nice every time we run into each other. But I didn't, I'd make you because I'd still go back to that guaranteed pick 6, Martin, back in 1998. I think that's one of the greatest moves in racing in a long time.
Yeah, it's I appreciate that. Look, you always have to try and think outside of the box, and I think if you have the ability or the opportunity to travel around the world to different racetracks, and I've been fortunate in life to be able to do that. A lot of times you can just see what other people are doing, and if it's a good idea in Japan, it might be a good idea in the United States, or if it's a good idea in Germany, it might work here. And the more you can see, sometimes it gives you a better perspective on, what, we should do that too. We should copy that idea. I think it can work here. And I just, like I said earlier, I think we've got a lot of really good things going for us. Purses have never been better at a lot of racetracks. You take an Arlington Park that we thought, might go the way of Hollywood Park, and it looks like it's going to be saved.
Right.
These are all really positive things. And I think the laws of supply and demand, right now there's a great demand for good horses, and there's not enough of them. And at some point that supply will have to start picking up again. And with the tax incentives that are given, I think a lot of people can start to get in the game and play it, 60 cents on the dollar. And with the purse levels that they're at, you have the ability to, I'd say make money, but at the very least maybe break even. And really it's not about that. It's about the experience you get. It's a horse can take you to Dubai, it can take you to Hong Kong, it can take you to Royal Ascot, it can take you to the Kentucky Derby, it can take you to Belmont Stakes or Saratoga. There's so many great experiences in racing, and that's what we need to sell to people, that, hey, come be part of this. This is a lot of fun. Bring your friends with you. It's a great social activity, and we've got a lot of good things to sell.
And Saratoga is still one of the most fun social places I've ever been in racing. I don't know. You've been to a lot more tracks around the world, but I don't know if you can beat Saratoga.
No, it really is. I mean, the track itself, there's just so much character at the track, and the barn area in the morning, going through the stables, it's awesome. And the town just embraces racing so much. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this a long time, and probably, one of the greatest days in racing for me was the morning that Baffert galloped American Pharoah, and 20,000 people came out that morning at like 7:30 in the morning. I remember Bob and I were staying in a winner's circle just going, holy cow. And, it's just when you see things like that, you realize just how special this place is. And they tell a story, he got beat, and I had made him a reservation at the Wishing Well, a restaurant up here. And I thought after he got beat, I had to sort of force my way in to get him a reservation for 12 on a Saturday night. And I thought, he's not going to go, and that guy's going to be upset with me. And I guess Baffert walked in and they gave him a standing ovation.
Oh, yeah.
And, that is really cool. It just says a lot about Saratoga and the people up here.
I don't think there's a more, I'm not going to start debating all the other tracks and everything. I don't think there's a more knowledgeable fan base that regularly attends a track than that does the Saratoga meet, in my opinion. They're great fans. They're knowledgeable fans. And then, you got all New England coming in, and, of course, upstate New York's a beautiful place this time of year. And I was there. I remember the first time I was at Saratoga, Martin, after a meet, I didn't realize you could walk in almost any restaurant. I thought you had to wait 2 hours at every restaurant. And then I went up there, I was my dad and I were at the Baseball Hall of Fame, and we drove over from Cooperstown. I wanted him to see the track, and I said, this is amazing. I can actually walk in and get a seat. It's not during race time.
Yeah, no, it's it really is just a great town. I mean, I've spent time at Del Mar certainly for several years, and then now at Saratoga for the last 6, and they're both special in their own way. But this place, it's really magical, and we're fortunate business continues to grow for us up here. And we just try to keep moving the ball forward and trying to do the right things, working with the community, and continue to try and grow racing up here. Obviously, this week we went to a 5-day race schedule during this meet, and some of that had to do with the construction down at Belmont, and some of it probably had to do with just the horse population in general. But the town has accepted it, and I think the horsemen and the employees certainly getting those 2 days off have helped. But it's a great place up here. And, I know purses are bigger at other tracks, but I tell you what, if you're an owner, there's nothing better than winning a race up at Saratoga.
Yeah, indeed. And I'll be at Belmont next week, right? Yeah, next week for NBC.
Yeah, next Saturday is the last legs of our Turf Triple Crown this year, the Jockey Club Derby and Jockey Club Oaks. And knock on wood, right now the fields look pretty good. And, it'll be interesting because we've got, 3-year-olds running a mile and a half on the turf, and the fillies, 3-year-old fillies, a mile and 3/8 on the turf. And these are long races for, American horses. And it's the first year we've done it. But so far I'm happy with the 6 races, that we've run, or the 4 we've run, and the 2 that are coming up. And, I read the blogs, and I read, Park Report and everything else. And when we put it out there, everyone's like, well, just give the money to Chad Brown. And, so far, while he's been competitive, he hasn't won them yet. And I probably just jinxed myself, and I'll probably win the next 2. But, these are tough races, and it's not that easy. And I think, unfortunately, Concrete Rose getting injured. Yeah. Rusty Arnold, she's a really special filly. And I just think that this whole turf thing, it was a good move by NYRA to do, and I think there's a bright future for it. And we look forward to next Saturday at Belmont, getting back down to New York City and getting to Belmont with the meet underway.
Yet another thing that one of the most innovative persons in all of racing does, and that's create this Triple Crown. You can see it on NBC next week. We'll talk more about that next week on this show. Meanwhile, Martin, I really appreciate your time, and the insight on an array of subjects that we've been able to cover, but I knew you would know something about all of them, so thank you.
No, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Okay, we'll do it again. Thank you. Martin Panza joining us here on the Horse Racing Show. We'll have more when we come back. Thank you. And welcome back. Thank you for tuning in again. Thank you for listening to us. We really appreciate this. 32 episodes of this horse racing show. For whatever reason, we continue to go on because you continue to listen, and we appreciate that very much. Be sure to like us on YouTube. It's easy to subscribe, right? It's free, and you just like us. Even if you only never watch us again, just like us. Because if you do, the more likes, then the more positioning you move up on the YouTube. I don't
algorithm.
That's right.
Thank you. Yep. That's why I have Thomas Kenny and Scott Hall and Ben Chaffins here. I just show up, talk, get on interesting guests.
That's it. And we've had so many guests now. We've got our playlists organized. So if you just want to check out jockeys or trainers or
you can go to YouTube and get all that?
Yeah, yeah. You can just pick a particular playlist and start sorting through there. It's kind of neat.
And that's on the Horse Racing Show.
That's correct. You can even subscribe to those playlists too. So if you want to know when the next jockey's on, like Gary,
I did not know that.
Yeah, so new things to make it an even more pleasurable experience.
Well, I'm glad I showed up today.
That's right.
When were you guys going to tip me off on this?
Sorry, we just sprung it on you.
Well, my thanks again to Gary Stevens and Martin Panza. Always great to catch up with a longtime friend, Gary Stevens. And Martin Panza, I wasn't just saying this. I really, if they ever have a commissioner, I would put him in as a nominee right now.
Heck yeah.
He's worked on both coasts, of course, California guy that's established in New York with racing up there, and offered some really good insights in there, even though, as everybody knows right now, there isn't that solution that we talked about at the start of this show. What do you do with fewer horses available, bigger purses, fewer horses? Some races you're going to have small fields at the moment until they start breeding more, and I don't know. We'll talk with one of the breeders later on in the upcoming shows. Anybody got any thoughts?
Did you enjoy the Travers?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I was in Vegas. I watched it in Vegas. I tell you what, if you can't be at Saratoga, being out by the pool with palm trees around you is not a bad day.
That's not too shabby.
I popped in. I actually went into my room. I didn't want to hang out in the sports book. I made a few wagers. I went up to my room and I watched it so I could actually see my friends Lafitte Pinkai and Gary Stevens doing the race. And so it was fun to watch.
Yeah. And Kenny, we're working on a requisition for the fog machine for you.
We need a fog machine.
We do.
To introduce us. We could all come running through.
That's right.
I did a fight show one time. They had a fog machine that we're supposed to walk out, and Boss Rutan and I were doing an MMA show, the legendary fighter, and I walked out, and there was when those things go bad, they go bad. When they break bad, they break bad.
They break real bad.
And, and you're coming out there and suddenly you can't see yourself. And then, you have, okay, too much fog. Okay, less fog. Let's do it again. You're walking through and taping it because primarily, as you can tell with this show, we like to just, I won't say wing it, but just come out and be a little extemporaneous. And we got a plan, but then we just go from there.
That's right.
So Boss and I always work that way together. And we came out and finally about the fourth time, we're getting a little annoyed. And it's because the fog machine. It's not because of us. We're saying our thing, but the fog keeps gathering around us. It's like John Carpenter movie. I kept thinking I was going to bump into Adrian Barbeau at any moment.
That's right.
Google that one.
That's right.
That's one of my favorite movies. I tell you, Carpenter made a string of those movies. The Thing and of course, Halloween, the original Halloween.
The original Fog. That's not the remake.
Yeah, not the remake Fog, the original Fog. That was with John Houseman, right? Yeah, he's in that.
That's great.
Okay. This is a horse racing show, though, right?
Yes.
I think so. Yes.
I should get back to that. Although we did get a couple of movie references in earlier.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you for being with us again. We'll be back next week with episode
33.
33. It could be a lucky number.
It can be.
3's always been a lucky number for me, so 33, who knows? All right. Thanks again, Gary Stevens, Martin Panza. Thank you, Thomas, Scott, Ben, and above all, thank you for joining us this week. I'm Kenny Rice, and we will see you again soon, we hope, on the Horse Racing Show.